let's stop villainizing social media and video games and hip hop music and point the finger at ourselves as parents. Because if you're just going to allow hip hop and music and video games to do it, well, here we are. Let's be accountable.
Allan Jackson is an award-winning children's book author, youth motivational speaker, literacy advocate, and honorary doctorate recipient.
When my son was 8 years old, he asked me a question. He said, "Dad, can we open up a lemonade stand?" So we built a little lemonade stand, and he made $50 in 3 hours selling lemonade. But he said, "Dad, I make $50. What am I going to do with $50?" So I went to my local bookstore to try to find a book to teach my son what to do with money. There were almost no books teaching kids about money. If you want the world to see a book teaching kids about money, then the person to do that is you. I submitted my manuscript to 147 different agents, and I was rejected 147 different times. And I just went to Google and I typed in, how do you self-publish a book? I sold about 150,000 copies of this book.
Did you get any sense why this was rejected by 147 agents?
Well, I mean, all you have to do is
Well, we've already established pre-recording that you are a Bronx born and bred native guy. Don't live there now, but let's get some backstory. So started in the Bronx. Take me from there through now.
Oh boy. So one of the powerful things about being born and raised in the Bronx is born in 1967 from a 15-year-old mom who didn't even know how she got pregnant, in which a year later she got pregnant again. With the second time she figured it out. If you do this, this is what happens. So that's how young and naive that she was. But we grew up impoverished. My father was incarcerated for most of my life. So stereotypically, I probably had, on paper, not the greatest startup and not the greatest childhood on paper. But reality-wise, I could not have had a more amazing childhood. My mother, despite being so young, was just such a rock star. She totally understood the power and the importance of raising two boys in this environment. She totally immersed herself in being a mom. And she provided us with so much abundance of love that she, to this day, is my best friend and my hero. And I know I wouldn't be anything of the man that I am today without her. So between that, books, which was just so, just permeated so much through our home, every room, from the bathroom, the kitchen, there were books everywhere. And like any child, you kind of gravitate to what you're surrounded by. And so we gravitated, books were just so prominent. I started reading at a very early age and was scaling up to reading, Of Mice and Men at like 8 years old. I'm reading Truman Capote and Dickens at 8, 9 years old. And then you take that background and then you add in that I grew up to watch the conception, birth, growth, and development of hip hop, like right there in front of me in the Bronx. Now you take all those things and put them together, along with being the biggest fan of the 27-time New York Yankees, like you mentioned earlier.
Yes, sir.
And I'm telling you, you have such a recipe for a person who kind of grows up with a sense of awareness, with a sixth sense of just how to persevere and how not to fear much. It's like I've seen things, some weird stuff and still somehow made it through personally, and then just using books as a tool to expand my mind, imagination, and soul, and then hip hop to give me a voice. It really was such a beautiful recipe to develop the character person that I'm very proud to be of today. So Bronx born and raised. I live in Fresno, California now, and as of course they say, you could take the boy out of the Bronx, but you can't take the Bronx out of the boy.
We've established that in the first 30 seconds. You made it sure. I said, hey, aren't you in Massachusetts? You're like, listen, I've lived in Massachusetts, but I'm from the Bronx. Immediately. That's right. I love it.
Always.
A couple things I want to
I may move to France, Paris. I would still be a boy from
the Bronx. A couple things I want to tap into. One, your brother, similar interest. Were books like something your mother just made sure were omnipresent? Is this just something you were born with, this love for ingesting this information? Or I'm curious what your brother's, way of being was as well in a tough environment.
It couldn't have been more opposite. He gravitated to sports and hanging out, and he was the kid that was playing basketball while I was reading the books, sitting on the park bench reading books, watching him play basketball. And a great guy, great kid, but books didn't kind of click with him the same way they clicked with me. I don't think there was any rhyme or reason to it, kind of just luck of the draw. But my brother, albeit a great guy, definitely took a different path, and you know, and the path that fit him. But this path of academia, of entrepreneurship, and just creativity definitely is the byproduct of books that were just, again, just really, really resonant in my in my home.
Sure. As a bookworm in that environment, I'm curious, how did that play for you socially? The key to life, it isn't money, it's happiness. And when you measure how happy you are, you actually become even more happy. Our friends at Gobundance, the tribe of millionaires, use a very specific tool to measure their happiness. It's called the Life Happiness Index, and you can have it too. Go over to Gobundance.com/LHI and take your Life Happiness Index assessment. You'll rate yourself in multiple categories on exactly how happy you are and get a custom output for you specifically that you can use in developing whatever goals you have for your life. Gobundance is the tribe of healthy, wealthy, generous people who choose to live epic lives. And the tool Gobundance members use at the base of all of that is the Life Happiness Index. Get out there and grab life big.
What a great question. And because what books do is that it expands so much of your world. And when you live within the 16 blocks of the projects, and that's kind of like, you know, the urban life, you basically are just regimented to being within these 16 blocks. Books take you away from that. They give you the opportunity to be able to see the world. And because of that, I gravitated to so much my first musical love of classic rock. And now, mind you, growing up in hip hop in the Bronx and the projects, where Grandmaster Flash and Run DMC and Curtis Blow and the Treacherous Three and Cold Crush Brothers, which I loved also, but I was also listening to Led Zeppelin, The Who, Pink Floyd, The Doors. And like when you're listening to music in the projects, everybody can hear it. So like I would be playing Kashmir by Led Zeppelin, one of the greatest beats of all time, and I'd walk outside and my friends would be like, "What are you listening to?" And for whatever reason, I wasn't one of those guys to shy away from. I very proudly said, "Yo, this group called Led Zeppelin. I know you're probably not familiar with them, but you got to check out this album. You got to check out, you know, The Doors. You got to check out Robert Plant. Robert Palmer. That's a few decades later. But yeah, so it created this really proud narrative of being my own individual, that I was equally comfortable in the space of listening to Run DMC, and also equally as comfortable as listening into the space of, you know, Jethro Tull. And like it gave me a great sense of pride. It also somehow or another gave me the perception of being cool, because I was my own person. And they could have easily gone the other way of being a dork or weird or different.
Right.
But somehow or another, it ended up being that, like Ty's his own guy. Like Ty doesn't need to follow the crowd. I remember also that probably about 12, 13 years old, me and about 8 other of my boys was in the basement smoking weed in the building that we lived in. And they passed me the joint. I had never smoked before. And I was the only one out of the 12 guys that were there that didn't smoke. Like I just, like, I didn't want to do that. And I wasn't going to succumb to the peer pressure of having to do it. And so for whatever reason, I think between music, between books, and between my mom, I was very fortunate to really grow up to be my own person. And I think it's a trait that I carry to this day.
What did you mean when you said hip hop gave you a voice?
So, you know, growing up in the projects, and let's just take public school as a foundation, you know, you grow up, I'm impoverished, again, in the projects, and predominantly everyone, all of my peers, all of my classmates were somewhere in that same ballpark. And so you grow up in an environment where when you're poor, you're voiceless. Like, you know, people don't pay attention to you. The schools were broken down, nobody cared. Drugs were around, nobody cared. Violence was around, nobody cared. And no matter how many people would voice their opinions about that, nothing really very much happened. And then hip hop comes along. And here comes this horde of young people who find this venue to be able to express their happiness, their joys, their sorrows, their angst, their creativity so loud that the entire world is forced to hear it. And all of a sudden, we mattered. These same people who were voiceless, that could have no power to change in the dynamics of what was around them, all of a sudden were the trendsetters. They were the people, when I said this, you did it too. When I wore this, you did it too. And it just created this dichotomy of power and energy. And yeah, I'm kind of goosebumping just talking about it. Like hip hop literally was the megaphone for young Black America. And no matter what part of the planet you were on, you heard it. And more importantly, you embraced it. And like, so to see 5, 6, 8 years after the spark of hip hop, to see people in Asia, China, like just in different parts of the world adopting what we started, it was just like, it was really powerful. And to this day, it's still, I argue that hip hop music is the dominating force in culture today.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't.
You can make that argument.
I wouldn't disagree with that, to be honest with you. I think it's an undertow of almost every music genre. I mean, there's even country artists
100.
that mix
100.
with rap. It's the beat, it's the drum beat of music, right? Like when you think about music, that thing that gets you is that bass drop, that drum beat, right? That's what gets you on time. And I feel like that's what hip hop is in the music genre.
Yeah, not only that, it's the epitome of cool. I mean, they're like, so just from a social construct, it's just cool. The way that hip hop artists dress, talk, swag, like it's outside of maybe, classic rock, when you see images of guys like Jim Morrison or Robert Plant, like you look at a Jay-Z or a Kendrick Lamar or a J. Cole, and you're like, these guys are just Drake. These guys are just cool, and no disrespect to the ladies of the world, whether we're talking Cardi B or
honestly,
it's just swag permeating.
Yeah, I agreed. And that's I was going to ask you that. My brain, the question I'm formulating, what's in my mind, I wrote down a couple of thoughts on or questions on your backstory, is okay, 15-year-old mother. So she's in her 20s when you're, a conscious child at that point. Dad's in jail. So you don't have that male role model. And there's a lot of discussion today around the importance of dad, the male role model, masculine energy, and all of that. So I guess I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I guess the question is, was dad ever present, and or was there some other stand-in role model that you had as a man, and or did hip hop, which is predominantly male, especially then, did that provide you with sort of like a sea of male influences to follow?
Yeah, all of the above. I mean, if you look at kids, and I wasn't neglected in any capacity, but for those who are, you see they gravitate towards the streets. The streets raise them. And so kind of hip hop raised me. And it's unfortunately a very much more positive, prominent way, as opposed to today's hip hop, which I could get on my soapbox and talk about, how the acts of hip hop are to the demise of so much of our culture. But I also don't want to be the old man saying, get off my lawn either. Like I can appreciate some of today's hip hop. With that being said, yes, hip hop was really, really important and laid down a foundation to guide me as a man, especially as a Black man with a Public Enemy and an Ice Cube and an NWA. Really kind of helped me see myself in the world and how to better navigate it, as a Black man growing up. But I did have a grandfather who was my best friend. He passed away when I was 10. But from 0 to 10, there probably, outside of my mom, isn't anyone else who had more influence on my life. It is so essential that children be loved by a male. Like moms are always going to be this nurturing, loving, but to have a male figure in your life to kind of guide you on how it is to be a man is so unbelievably important. And I'm very proud that I had my grandfather as that person, albeit again, he passed away when I was 10, but fortunately it was just enough for me to get what it felt like to have a man come home and sit you on his knee and tell you about it, talk about your day and toss you a football. It really made a huge difference. But I'll say also two very surprising role models that were really influential for me to be a dad and also an entrepreneur for that matter is George Jefferson from the Jeffersons. Yeah. Like seeing this Black man, with this attitude and this charisma and this drive and this energy, especially in the 70s, where we're really just kind of discovering our voice and see this character larger than life, just kind of as an entrepreneur, as an unapologetic entrepreneur, and then moved on up to the east side to
Penthouse in
something
the
apartment in the
sky.
sky.
Yeah,
Yeah,
apartment in the
thanks,
sky.
brother.
Yeah.
Like, forgive me, brothers and sisters, for not remembering the complete lyrics, but that was really powerful for me. But also, so was, as a parallel, was James Evans from The Father of Good Times. Like, to see the dynamics of those two really proud, strong fathers exist in these completely two different spaces, and the way that they led their families and or businesses, or lack thereof, in the case of James Evans from Good Times.
Yeah.
And for those millennials who don't know who the Jeffersons are and Good
Google
Times
it.
are, yeah, Google it. YouTube exists for a reason. Please, you won't be disappointed. Those two were, as James Evans and George Jefferson are as influential as to me growing up, and providing me with that level of role modelship from a parent as any true ones that I had.
That's cool, man. I want to get into this a little bit. We're gonna pivot, because you've got the Danny Dalar books, Entrepreneur Fair. We're gonna get into all of that and your pivot to entrepreneurship, or where that came. But
let's go,
on
baby.
This
I work
topic
for you.
Yeah, on this topic of a strong male, like I love what you said. Children need to be loved by a man. And then you gave some good context, like what a man is. But can you dive deeper on that? What is it about, how do I put this? Talk about your perspective, what you saw in George Jefferson, and I forget his name from Good Times, and other men in your life.
Evans.
Like, what does it mean to be? What does a man's love provide? What is that? Is it discipline? Is it softer than that? Like, what is it about being loved by men? Because I completely agree with you, right? This is such an important topic, and I think it's gotten lost a little bit. And you're starting to see some voices pop up, like Jordan Peterson and others, who are really championing the idea of masculinity is not toxic, right? And being a strong man is not a toxic thing. But what is that for you? Can you define that? Because I know you've done a lot of work with these children's books and everything else that you're doing. So I'm sure you have a perspective on this.
The first thing that popped in my head organically is vulnerability. I think what's really important, of course, the machismo and the persona of what it means to be a man, to be the hunter, to be the provider, to be the pillar of strength in the home. Yes, of course, I think those things are all important. But I think what's equally important is being a partner to your spouse, to showing, because I think the most important aspect, and you could see it permeate so much through those two characters, is the way that they love their significant other. And I think that is such a powerful thing, because the way our parents love and show each other love is how we will show the world how we love. Like, I think that's really important, and something that I made sure in front of my children that I showed their mother love, as much as physical, social, cultural, like as much love as I possibly could, because I knew the way that they saw me love their mom is the way that they would see and want to receive love in return. And so I think having that level of understanding that that as a man, you are simply a partner in the uplifting growth and development of your family. And I think if you're open and enough to realize that there really is no hierarchy, like, at least for me, there isn't. I as the father am humble enough to know that I am parallel to my significant other. I'm not above my significant other. I am never at any point going to say I'm the man, and because of that, this is the way that we do it. I'm open enough to, and hopefully wise enough to say, I'm a partner here, and us as a partnership are going to do what's best for the whole together, collectively, and work with my significant other. And I think a lot of that is one, being really self-aware about who I am and what I can do and what I can't do. And that is where vulnerability lies, to be able to say, you know what, as the man, I'm sorry, I don't know how to change a tire, but I can make a great omelet. So, if my significant other is all about getting her hands dirty and being able to change the tire, I'm going to get in that kitchen and make the omelet while she's changing the tire. And having that sense of vulnerability to say that I don't have to have, the stereotypical Rambo type mentality to be a father, and instead be more of a fluid, open, objective, loving, caring, passionate, compassionate, empathetic person I think that those are the foundations for me personally that have made me a better father, and that I've also seen in the people and the male role models that have given me that foundation.
Vulnerability. I love that. Great explanation as well. Before we move on to what you're doing now, your entrepreneurial endeavors, I want to clean up the hip hop part real quick. So
Sure.
You did mention, I want to give you a spot here to talk about today's hip hop. Do you remember Exhibit?
Sure, of course.
I had him on the show. We actually did a live interview with him in San Fran, and we repurposed it. We've stayed in touch. Amazing guy. Alvin Joyner is his real name. He is from that era. I mean, he's mid 90s, early 90s into the early 2000s is when he was prominent. So I think about him and meeting him and, just knowing his persona, this hardcore rapper. I remember he was on every album. It felt like he had his own, but he was on every Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, that Death Row time album. And then meeting the guy and him talking about, he's an entrepreneur. He has a cannabis company, ironically, but he talked a lot about the persona of hip hop and how it gave him an outlet and an ability to express. And Exhibit was this guy and Alvin was this other guy. And I feel like today, some of the artists that you see out there, maybe they don't have that. They don't at least display a disconnect between the persona and the actual individual. They're kind of leaning into this persona, which I don't know, might be damaging, but I don't know what your perspective is. What rant? Let me hear about today's hip hop. What's your beef?
Yeah, I think you kind of bring it up. And authenticity means everything. I think after a while, no matter what persona you're playing, you're exposed for who it is that you are. When Tech 6ix9ine proposes himself as a gangster, like you can see, like that's just kind of not the case. Or when MC Hammer, to bring it back, all of a sudden became this thug, and put the hammer pants away, like dude, that's not who you are. What are you doing? Like that's not who you are. And no matter what facet of life that you're in, when you all of a sudden, when the persona overshadows the authenticity of who you are, it's hard to be taken seriously. And I think that's a microcosm of hip hop. We can't take this seriously. It's just we know the majority of these kids who are talking solely about drugs and sex and cars and money. We know just it's a paper tiger. Like you're not that rich. You don't have that much power. It's all just music and celluloid and then parallel that with just the talent's not there. Yeah. So not only is your message diluted because it's not authentic because it's not who you are, but you're not even good at it. So why are we taking you seriously? And the answer is we're not. So there's just a real small handful of people who have exceptional talent that rise to the top, whether it's a J. Cole or a Drake or a Kendrick Lamar or a Cardi B. And the rest are these kind of revolving door artists who just come in and say a couple of things, make a little bit of noise, and then you don't hear from them again in 2 years. And somebody pointed out something really great I read the other day, just real simple. Nobody puts out great albums anymore. Like there just aren't great albums, and you singles. Can tell that they're just singles. And so these guys will come up and have a real good banger for the summer, don't have a body of work either within their album or certainly within their tenure as an artist that takes them anywhere. And so it is refreshing when you get a Cardi B or a Drake whose albums have just are great bodies of work and not just these one-hit wonders. So I'm obviously not a fan of today's hip hop. With that being said, I have kids in their early 20s, and I never ever want to be the get off my lawn dad. Like I want to let's check it out. My daughter and I, whenever we travel together, and we travel a lot, we have a 2 for 2. She gets to pick 2 songs, like I get to pick 2 songs, and we just go back and forth. And she'll play stuff from I can't even think of some of the artists' names, Lil Yachty and Glorilla, and I'll play something from Shalimar and from and Chic and Nile Rodgers, and then we'll just ping pong back and forth. And what's powerful is I've got some of her music on my playlist now just from listening to her, and she has a lot of my music on her playlist. She's a huge Barry White fan and the Spinners and and stuff that I grew up on because we had these times to share one another, expose each other's cultures of music. and we're both better for it. And so yeah, I highly recommend for your listeners, next time you're and your kids, especially when you've got a nice long drive, have a 2 for 2. Like, you listen to 2 songs of theirs, they listen to 2 songs of yours, and just keep ping ponging back and forth. I guarantee you. And then give some backstory. Like, she tells me like the things about this particular artist, like little Uzi Vert. We share the same birthday, and so my name is Tyrone, so my daughter calls me Little Uzi Roni, and which is hysterical. But I also know that this young kid who's also talented, we share a birthday together. And so like every birthday, my daughter goes, "Happy birthday, Dad." And, "Happy birthday, Little Uzi Roni." And also to Little Uzi Vert. So
that's cool.
So yeah, it is very cool.
In the context of being a dad too, that male energy, like I think that's the important thing. So you mentioned Cardi B, Drake. They are immensely talented, and they are incredible self-promoters and marketers, which I admire about anybody that has the confidence to say, "Hey,
for sure,
this is me. This is how I show up to the world." Same time, their lyrics can be, WAP isn't exactly the most family friendly song in the world, but I think what I'm learning with younger kids, I have 2 boys, 8 and 5, is there's the older one especially is starting to get it's just the world, right? He's starting to get exposure to things that don't make sense to him. Not necessarily a song like that, but that's coming, right? In the next 2-3 years, that's coming.
Sure.
And I think what I think about my childhood, I had 2 parents in the household. Dad worked all the time. Dad wasn't the guy to have a talk about the birds and the bees. That just wasn't him. Like, I had to figure that shit out on my own, right? Like he was a strong parental figure. He showed a lot of love to my mother, which I've been able to model, everything you talked about. But he wasn't the guy to have the conversation with me. And when I look at what you're doing, the 2 and 2 or 2 by 2, it's, hey, these lyrics can be jarring. And if you're that old man on the porch, you might be like, "Turn this crap off. What are you, crazy?" And you vilify your kid for listening to something like that, versus, saying, "Hey, look, those are words. This isn't a lifestyle, right? To take on. Those are words. It's interesting to talk about the artistry. It's interesting to talk about the artist. Like, why do they have these lyrics? Why is this a prominent song for them? Why is it so catchy? Like, it is, a song is catchy as hell. I'm thinking of it right now." But I think that's the power of a strong father figure, and not that moms can't be 100%. This, but is being able to have to hold space as that strong person in your kid's life and say, "Yeah, I hear this, and great, let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation about it," as opposed to it becoming something that permeates who they are. I don't know. That was just something that jumped out at me.
100%. Listen, I've touted, especially now as an author, getting out in the world and engaging with kids. Parents, you are their primary educator, and it's not even close.
Yeah.
And what you do or don't do is exactly how your child is going to navigate in the world. So if you're embodying them with self-esteem and confidence and love and discipline and structure and honor, they're going to go out in the world, and regardless of what is thrown at them, they have a better chance, not 100% chance, but a better chance of reflecting the woes of our country. Whether they're coming from drugs, sex, or a song like WAP on, and they can compartmentalize and go, "Yes, that's catchy, and I get it, I know what they're talking about, but my parents taught me blank to respect myself. So like, I'm not going to give my WAP out to everybody on the planet, like, because that's not how I was raised. That's not who I am." But when we don't, and we fall down, and we don't have the opportunities to discuss sex, drugs, the things with our children, to kind of give them this body of armor so that they can go out in the world and navigate it. When that armor is thinner, then they have a better chance of succumbing to so many of these things. So yeah, listen, it's our hip hop today is no different to, hip hop today is just kind of a byproduct of what rock and roll was in the 60s, and how people were banning it and shunning it off, and you can't put it down. And, there's no way you're listening to this particular artist. And, we all grew up okay. Yeah. We all grew up just fine. So, let's stop villainizing social media and video games and hip hop music, and point the finger at ourselves, at parents. And what is it that we are doing as their primary educators to empower our kids so that when they go out into the world, they know how to navigate listening to a song, being exposed to a drug, being propositioned by a person. They know how to navigate the world. Because if you're just going to allow hip hop and music and video games to do it, well, here we are. Yeah. And so let's be accountable.
Agreed.
That's that the 100. That's the primary word as a parent. The primary word as an entrepreneur. The primary word is a human. Let's just be accountable for those that are around us, especially and including ourselves, and do a better job of uplifting and educating.
Agreed. Danny Dalar, where did this franchise, this book, what give me the genesis of the Danny Dalar education series, what you're trying to do with it, where it started, so on and so forth.
Yeah, so this is also the byproduct of being open-minded to, again, my son. When my son was 8 years old, he asked me a question that would change my life. And he said, Dad, can we open up a lemonade stand? Now, remember, I'm born and raised in the Bronx. You don't do lemonade stands in the Bronx. It just kind of doesn't work that way. But we lived at the time in Western Massachusetts, and everybody did lemonade stands. So me and my cute little 8-year-old son went and got a cardboard box and a pitcher of lemonade and a tablecloth and little umbrellas and built a little lemonade stand. And he made $50 in 3 hours selling lemonade, which was like totally blew my mind. I'm thinking, we'll make $5, $6, $7, go get some ice cream, call it a day. But he said, Dad, I made $50. What am I going to do with $50? I wasn't prepared to say what to do with his $50. So I went to my local bookstore to try to find a book to teach my son, what to do with money. There's got to be a book teaching kids about money. And I noticed two things. One, there were almost no books teaching kids about money. And there were few books with a young Black protagonist as the cover, on the cover, that looked like my son, that was positive and contemporary. There was Underground Railroads and segregation and slavery and me and Muhammad Ali and stuff like that. But there wasn't a Diary of a Wimpy Kid with a Black kid on the cover. And so I took those two ideas and thought that maybe I could find somebody to write a children's book that teaches kids about money with a young Black protagonist that looked like my son. And then I thought about the quote from Gandhi: to be the change you wish to see in the world. And if you want the world to see a book teaching kids about money with a young Black protagonist, then the person to do that is you. The name Danny Dalar, right in that Barnes and Nobles in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, just popped into my head. I went home, started typing. It took me a year to write the manuscript and another year pretty much of submitting my manuscript to agents and publishers. I submitted my manuscript to 147 different agents, and I was rejected 147 different times. And after that 147, I said, this is not going to work this way. Let me find another way. And I just went to Google and I typed in, how do you publish a book? Self-publish a book. And it gave me amazing guides and resources for me to start my own publishing company. I named that company Big Head Books. You can see why. And about 2.5 years after my son said, hey, Dad, can we open up a lemonade stand? This book was born. And it really was one of the proudest days of my life. And up to this point, I sold about 150,000 copies of this book independently. Wow. It's become a serial story in 20 newspapers across the country. It's been a theatrical play with over 40 performances in Western Massachusetts.
No shit. Where was?
No shit.
You said 40 performances?
40 performances in Pittsfield, Massachusetts at the Colonial Theater. And we had 40 performances of Danny Dalar as an actual theatrical production. And one of the great moments of my life, I actually got to play one of the parts, a very small part, but a part nonetheless. But to look out onto the crowd of hundreds of people wearing Danny Dalar shirts and holding Danny Dalar signs from a book that was rejected by 147 different agents gave me a sense of pride that to this day it's hard to top.
What was the feedback? Was there any, or is it just no, thank you? What, or do you have a sense of? Did you get any sense why this was rejected by 147 agents?
Well, I mean, all you have to do is look and see at the statistics. Why am I struggling with that? I haven't had my morning beverage yet. That 80% of all children's books published today either feature a white or an ambiguous character like an animal, like an elephant or giraffe.
Even today?
Which leaves, even today.
Okay.
Even today. I think actually it's 78% today. So that the majority of books that are published they don't feature children of color. So, and when they do, they're usually historical or cultural in nature. So they don't speak to a wide range of a wide audience. So the publishing world is not accustomed to having contemporary books featuring children of color. So that's one. Then there's the aspect of promoting financial literacy. That's just not a sexy topic. That's not something that maybe will push the button, push the numbers of being able to sell lots of copies. And I'll tell you a quick story after this. And my final point is that also I was an inexperienced author. Like I was a nobody. I was somebody who probably said, one of 50 people that day who submitted a story. And so like it's easy to see how it was rejected. But as I tout that I was not going to let 127 strangers dictate what I knew to be something that's really successful. But I want to just spin off on saying something of one of the other reasons why this book probably was rejected. So I recently submitted this book to a really large entertainment company. It's actually an animation studio, a pretty sizable one, certainly not going to say the name. And I pitched it to them as an idea to run as a show. And they loved it. They loved the idea, loved the concept, especially in this culture where there's such a lack. I mean, COVID exposed so many things, but our lack of entrepreneurship and financial literacy is near the top of them.
Sure.
And they literally said that this project was too educational for us.
Too educational.
They said it was too educational.
Interesting.
That is exactly what they said. And so that I think that kind of as an example of where we are as a culture and a society. And if you look at today's cartoons, like if you just go on any Nickelodeon show, most of them, there are very few Dora the Explorers or the little girl who's the doctor, or there are few educational programs. The world of Sesame Street, is kind of taking a back seat to things that are just minutia
and victim. Like I watch the shows my kids watch, and the phrases my kids utter from these supposedly wholesome shows are things like OMG or
right
for me or what's the phrase I've heard recently. Anyway, but it's like these kids play the victim in these shows. These characters are victimized, it seems like, and it bothers the hell out of me. But I got to believe like a Coco Melon or something like that, who I mean, that's what they do. Blippi and all these different educational types of shows. I don't know. There's got to be a space for something that is black or white. Doesn't matter the race of the main character, but just financial literacy. First and foremost.
I think it's a no-brainer. And for a guy on his own in the trunk of his car to sell 150,000 copies of a book about financial literacy, I mean, if that's not a telltale sign that there's a space here for this, then I don't know what is. Because if I had an actual publishing company behind me to help me with this, I'd easily sell 1 million copies of this. So, but I'm very fortunate that a publishing company did see the power of this and help me write a spinoff to that book titled "Make Your Own Money," which did just come out a year and a half ago. That's doing really well.
Good for you, man. That's amazing. Now, so Danny Dalar, it's spun off into, you have an entrepreneur fair as well. Talk about that a little bit. What is this, and what do you accomplish with this?
So with my new book, Make Your Own Money, that I just showed, it really is my first book, Danny Dalar, is story based, and within the story, Danny's talking about finance and entrepreneurship, but it's really wrapped around a really fun and engaging story, which is why it's one of the reasons why it's successful. But my most recent book, Make Your Own Money, is really a blueprint. It's literally a step-by-step guide how kids as early as 5, 6 years old can make their own money, and it's really the foundation of entrepreneurship, of how a kid can become an entrepreneur. Which, just casually scrolling through social media one day, I saw a science fair. And we've all been privy to science fairs. We know what they are. We've participated in them, or at least aware of them. We understand the concept of them. And I just got the idea. What if we took that exact same premise, and instead of kids showcasing how a volcano erupts or how a light bulb works or how fungus grows, they're showcasing their ideas for a business. And this book is just a perfect foundation to teach kids how to do exactly that. Including at the back of the book, it gives worksheets with that kids can demonstrate their business plan, their P&L, and just things that they need to do to become an entrepreneur. So I pitched it to the district in which I lived at the time, in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, and last year we piloted it with about 250 students. And it went so well that we scaled up and did all fifth graders, about 450 fifth grade students, and participated in the first inaugural Danny Dalar Entrepreneur Fair. And to walk in this room and see 450 students standing beside their trifold with their idea for business, not the idea that was bestowed upon them, but their concept of not only just a business, but in some cases, an actual business. Some of these kids had actual businesses of bracelets and landscaping and art and tutoring. And to see them so proud to be able to show, hey, here's my, and give me their little, 2-minute elevator pitch of what their business is. It is, I, for one, guarantee you that this will be a household name in less than 5 years. And when kids have the power to know that they are accountable, the word that we used before, for their own success, and that the mindset of entrepreneurship is the foundation of that success, it is going to be such a great game changer. Because that, I think, is the essence of the entrepreneur fair. It's not that every kid is going to become an entrepreneur, but to establish an entrepreneurial mindset and of self-awareness, of self-reliance is to me the foundation of this product and why it's going to be really successful.
What do you anticipate? I mean, I'll be honest. I'm a fairly fervent, I don't know. I don't love the public school system. I think there's a lot of issues with the public school system.
What's your brother?
So what do you anticipate? Because I'm expecting, I'm guessing that, the model for you is to get this into more public schools. And in Pittsfield, it was successful. You've got a relationship there. You built, obviously, inroads there from living there. But what do you anticipate? Or maybe you've already started to talk to schools. Like, what's the response you're getting from schools around this? Or what do you anticipate?
So I just built a relationship. I live in Fresno, California now. I just spoke with the representatives of some administrative directors from the Fresno public school system, and we are excited to launch this next year in the Fresno public school system, which has hundreds of elementary schools within it. And I know that that's going to be a huge catalyst. Where we just did it in Western Massachusetts, 4 new districts just signed up to take the program. I think the key to this program, because the struggle with the program is that because of public schools having this structure of standardized testing and so many of the rigorous structural things that they have to do, it's kind of hard to fit in these extracurricular kind of activities. With that being said, I think every school now is being open-minded enough to know that financial literacy is really essential. And this isn't necessarily a curriculum-based program, so it's not something that I'm looking to install inside classrooms. This is kind of a almost field trip-like project that the educators are not doing the heavy lifting. The educators will give the kids the books. They will read the books together as a classroom, but then the students go home and work on the project. So it's not necessarily a project that they'll be doing in school, although they will eventually bring it back to school. They will do this on their own. So I think that's one of the good things, because these educators are worked hard enough. Sure. They don't necessarily need another program or project to kind of add on to what it is that they're doing. And this also is fun. And the kids really, really enjoy this work. The other part is that we do request sponsorships, because we understand that a lot of public schools are strapped for money.
That's what I was going to ask you. Yeah. Are they funding this? Are they actually allocating resource to this?
So we're sharing resources for this. For the last Entrepreneur Fair, Guardian Insurance, which is a really good sized insurance company, and is really committed to the betterment of its community, sponsored this program. Wow. So we're working our best to work with financial institutions or community corporations to flip the bill for this program, especially financial institutions, because as these kids are developing a sense of entrepreneurship, when it is time for them to actually become entrepreneurs and they need a loan, where are they going to get that loan from? So if they, it would be really smart for a Citibank, a Key Bank, a Wells Fargo, to a Chase Bank to support an effort like this, because they are literally building future, awareness for their business with these young people.
I love that you're doing this, and everything that you talk about. I mean, even from your early upbringing, it's sort of, you're one of these innate, born with it entrepreneurial people. Like, I'm going to live the life the way I want to live it. I don't care what everybody else thinks. That's not That's not normal in the best way. That's not a normal way. Like usually most of us succumb for a period of time to our social groups or to peer pressure. But what I love is that you're finding a way to fund this. But what makes me boil is there's so much stupid shit that's funded that this can't be, you know what I mean? Like this is the most crucial aspect, and the tone deafness of schools to know like, well, yeah, we hear this buzz out there about financial literacy. It sounds like a trending topic, but to not like, holy cow, it is a number one. It's not. Look, there's so much crap happening in schools right now, and there's so many issues. We talk about like right now, there's this whole trans thing. You know, again, I don't have an issue with anybody that wants to be whatever they want to be, but I just think where this movement is jumping the shark is like going into the school system. Like that's not where it belongs. Like let that be for adults to decide what adults are going to do. But for financial literacy to not get the attention that something like that does, or whatever, any activist sort of thing that's out there just blows my mind. It really does. And I'm glad that you're able to find funding from private institutions. And that's just, honestly, that alone speaks to the issue. A corporation, a company that's founded by an entrepreneur and is run by people who have had a through meritocracy, put themselves in a position to understand what the market needs, fund it. The school, this bubble, the noise it's like resounding. Financial literacy is a major problem in our schools, especially inner cities, especially in areas where maybe they don't have the support of a 2-parent household or whatever. For this not to be funded like instantly blows my mind. There's no question there, but I had a rant about that. It blows my mind.
Well, let's just macro this down, micro this down. Why isn't financial literacy taught in school? Let's just keep it real simple. Why for the most part are either the educators that run our system are completely inept and just don't necessarily see how important this is, or it's strategic, and that we're purposefully not promoting financial literacy because we know that this country has. I don't want to get too hard on my soapbox, but we know that it's easier to control people when they are naive, when they are downtrodden, and we can make more money off people when they are, lesser than more than. So we can conspiracy theory this all day.
Well, it's not even that. Look, the Rockefellers established this system to build employees in the Industrial Revolution, right? Like this is not how we've traditionally learned for thousands of years. This is like a 150-year experiment. Like the current education system is built to make you stand up, sit down. There's a bell. That's the authority. Listen to them, right? Like go get a job. And I guess, at the time when factory work and industrial type work and that sort of environment, that employee environment was essential, then you build curriculum or you build an education system to train people to do that. But we're so far beyond that. And this just hasn't evolved with it. So I really don't. I don't think there's a guy in a room somewhere like, we're going to, but there is an inherent bias or maybe like a digging in by those at the top or those that are at the, on these school boards around what education is today and like digging further into it for some reason and ignoring the fact that we've evolved so much as a society past why our schools are the way they are today, meaning like from the early 1900s or late 1800s when this current system was established. So there's definitely a control aspect to it. And the unfortunate part is, those that are the most impoverished suffer the most. And we have race lines that it's less about race. It's more about the poverty line, right? Like the more people of color, more people in that are minorities are in poverty. So therefore that entire race gets underrepresented or the privileges is gone there because the school system is in, whether they want to or not, keeping people in their place. I don't know. That's what I got.
Well, then again, it all comes back to the parent because sometimes it's hard to fight that Goliath. It's I won't say it's impossible, but it's really, really hard to fight that 100-year-old Goliath who has built this system that probably for them is working pretty well. Depending upon who's actually, because I do believe that there's some people. I'm sorry. I really do think that
Yeah.
there are
There's
these
got to be
Dr.
something, right?
Evils. There's
Yeah.
these Dr. Evil people who are just like, set on keeping the poor poor and the rich rich. I mean, I'm sorry. Have you not been paying attention to our government as of late?
Well,
But
it's funny, real quick before you finish that point, because there is, you're right. I should correct what I said. I think the issue is that you've got the individual that rises up where government interest meets corporate interest meets media interest. And there's those people. I mean, whatever you want to think about him, like an Anthony Fauci, when you hear about him, and I mean, he is a byproduct of being, in between this corporate government media sort of interest. He benefits in all aspects. So I don't know about him. I don't know the guy or whatever, but that's the kind of individual that is in the room, right? Because they benefit from all angles of the power. And so that is the Dr. Evil in the room. Again, that example of a person, that one individual that understands how to climb up that corporate structure because it has government, it's aligned with government interests, it's aligned with media interests. So now we're getting way into our tinfoil hats here, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
But my ending point is that it again comes back to the primary educator. It again comes back to the parent. It again comes back to how we are raising our kids so that we put them out into the world. Like that's where it begins. And if we fail there, then we allow them to succumb to whatever crumbs that our government, our society, our world gives them. And instead of being able to figure out how to take those crumbs and make pie out of them and start their own business. So yeah, the foundation, and to me, of everything, where the accountability of who we are as a society starts from home, and it starts with our parents.
Yeah, agreed. Love the discussion, man. I think, inherent in being an entrepreneur, there's a level of defiance. So when like that, there's just this sort of like, I don't like how that works. And like you said, I forget who you quoted. Was it Gandhi? Hey, I gotta write the book, right? Like nobody else is going to do this book. So I got to write the book. And it's the same thing. If we're not speaking out about stuff we're passionate about, with good feelings in our heart about it, then who will? I want to real quick. You have a doctorate, an honorary doctorate. Tell me that story.
My gosh. I've been so fortunate in the 12 years that I've become an author to learn how to become, when I tout myself as an author, I do it kind of tongue in cheek. I'm an author, but I don't consider myself a writer, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
I consider myself a storyteller. Writing is an art that I have nowhere near and probably never, ever will perfect. But I think I'm a pretty decent storyteller. But when I first became an author and I started going out into the world, I discovered that a lot of kids honestly just didn't like reading. And so it's like, how am I going to navigate through this space and uplift this culture of kids if they don't even like reading in the first place? And as a kid who had books as such a tremendous catalyst for the growth of development who I am, I know the power of books and what it is that they can do. And so how do I shift that culture? And so I swayed away less from being an author and swayed more into becoming an advocate for promoting literacy. Mm-hmm. And how do you do that with children? Well, you do that with fun. You do that with joy. So I kind of shifted visiting kids talking about books into shifting and talking to kids about reading. And I like to say during my presentations, if you took Tony Robbins, Dr. Seuss, and Kevin Hart and had a love child, it would be me. So my presentations are funny. We're engaging pop. Yeah, like within the first 45 minutes of first hour of my presentation, I'm not even talking about my books. We're just talking about why reading matters. And I do it within a really, really funny stand-up comedic presentation called The 5 Reasons Why You Need to Read. And we are laughing. And it's the most fun that you kids are having. Literally years after I visited a school, kids are still reaching out to me about how memorable that time was. And doing that, aligning with doing 3 TED Talks about illiteracy and how it's impacted our society, and especially, as you mentioned, communities that are disenfranchised, has been, and working on a program called the FULL Program, which stands for Families United Through the Love of Literacy, to help incarcerated parents use books as a tool to engage with their children despite the fact that they're incarcerated. So one of my my business partner is named Eddie Taylor. We videotape kids reading my picture book titled When I Close My Eyes. We record them. We used to package it up in a DVD. Now we send it to a YouTube link and we send it to their children along with the copy of the book. So the children can now press this link and watch their mom or dad read them a story. And it really, really, it is such a game changer for kids to see their parents humble.
Amazing.
And really just like excited. The parents give an opportunity to have a message to them about, redemption, about, grief, about just happy to do this for them. It's really a great, powerful program. So fortunately, the Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts saw this a couple of years ago, reached out to me and graced me with an honorary doctorate for my body of work in empowering young people. And then you'll also see I've got this hoodie titled Read or Else. And with each purchase, we send a book to a child in a homeless shelter. So or a Title I school. So you take that body of work, that goes from a guy with an idea to teach kids write a book about money. How as an entrepreneur can I grow this and scale this so that this book is more than just a book? Like this book is a mission. Or these books are a mission to be able to empower people. I was going to say our young people, but really children of all ages to be better versions of themselves. And so whether it's Read or Else, the full program, the books, my presentations, Danny Dalar Academy, which we didn't even talk about, the Danny Dalar Entrepreneur Fair. These are all just branches off the tree of my body of work that was visible enough that the school honored me with a doctorate.
Tell me about which school was it that honored you with the doctorate?
So this is MCLA, which I think 5 years ago, Newsweek said was the #1 college in the country. So Massachusetts College of Liberal Arts, located in Western Massachusetts. I can't remember.
Somewhere in Western Massachusetts.
Specifically. Yeah.
Talk about Danny Dalar Academy. What is the academy?
So about 8 years ago, an economics professor from Northern Kentucky University got a hold of my first book, Danny Dalar, and he had been looking for a book or a way to empower the young people of his disenfranchised community about finance and entrepreneurship. And he reached out to me and said he would like to build a program titled Danny Dalar Academy. So Danny Dalar Academy is about 4-week-long curriculum-based program in which kids read the book and they go through a 2-week-long curriculum about finance, entrepreneurship, and just it's really diving into the world of those two things. And at the end of the program, these students, usually all 5th graders in an elementary school, will create their own business. And with that business, one school sold $1,500 worth of painted rocks with messages on them. Another school made $1,200 in profits from selling lemonade and popcorn. And with this money, they can do whatever they want with it. They can go on a class trip, they can have a pizza party, but almost every school has given it back to their local humane society or nonprofit in their community as a sense of philanthropy. So these kids are not just learning finance and entrepreneurship, they're also developing skills to give back to their community. This program was recently taken over and adopted by the Federal Reserve of Cleveland. So now the Federal Reserve of Cleveland is now running Danny Dalar Academy. I think up to this point, about 20,000 students have gone through Danny Dalar Academy. And the end result of when these kids, after the kids do their business, they get to come to the Federal Reserve, about 400 or 500 kids at a pop, and they get to meet the author and they get to showcase their ideas for businesses. And that is Danny Dalar Academy.
You're a force to be reckoned with, my friend. That is unbelievable. I mean it. That's all awesome. One last thing before we wrap here. What were you doing before you became an author?
So I worked for Allied Waste, which I think is now Republic Services. Allied Waste, if you go to your business or school, there's a big dumpster in the back where they put all the garbage and cardboard. My job was to sell schools, organizations, businesses, these dumpsters. So I was a trash can salesman, for lack of a better word. And but we would sell these really large dumpsters, and I was a sales rep for them. And it was a good job. I enjoyed my time working with them, but it was a job. It certainly wasn't my purpose. But when my son said, "Hey, Dad, can we open up a lemonade stand?" That was the universe offering me my purpose and saying, if you pay attention to this, and you make this what it can be, this can be the reason that you're here. And Mark Twain said, the two most important days of your life are the day you were born and the day you find out why. And when I became an author, I knew why I was here. So I sold. I was a sales rep for Allied Waste.
Wow. When did you end up leaving? Like in context of the book, was it right after it was published? Like I'm always curious about the quit story, because I have my own. Yep. Right, the quit story. Like, were you just like, oh yeah, I made so much money that I just stepped over into this incredible. Oh, no. So usually that's the story. That's the story, is like, no, it was a leap. Talk about the leap.
So when my book came out, it came out December of 2011. And okay, so real quick. So when you're an indie author, bookstores want nothing to do with you. Sure. They want nothing to do with you. So when I started going to bookstores and discovered that nobody, they didn't want to carry my book, I'm like, how the heck am I going to figure out how to sell my book if I can't get them in bookstores? And I asked myself a real simple question. Where are kids? Where are the kids that I want to put these books into the hands of? Are they in Target and Walmart or in Barnes and Nobles? No, they're in schools. So I would go directly to schools and organizations and just start knocking on their door. And in 2 months, I sold 2,000 copies. Like 2,000, like I sold 1,000 copies a month for 2 months, just banging on doors. The second month, I reached out to Carver Bank in New York City. They're the largest Black-owned bank in the country. I sent a copy to the CEO, and 2 weeks later, she sent me a letter or called me and said, I love this book. Would you come to Harlem and talk to the children of our community about finance and entrepreneurship? And can I buy 1,000 copies to give out to these kids?
Amazing.
That was 2 months after the book came out, 3 months after the book came out. When I got that phone call, I called my boss and I said, I quit.
I'm out.
I knew if I could sell 3,000 copies in less than 3 months, part-time, I know I can change the world. And with like no idea what the hell I was doing. I could argue I still don't know what I'm doing. Yeah. But with just tremendous resolve. And I just took the Jay-Z mentality. I would just take books and throw them in the trunk of my car like it would be, instead of a mixtape, it would be books. And I just was pounding on doors. And a few, this financial institution would take 100 copies. This school would take 200 copies, and just grind it, man. Most of my books are not in stores. Out of the almost 200,000 copies of my books that I've sold, well over 200,000 copies, I just go directly to the schools. And because, what's the old saying? Why do people rob banks? That's where the money is. So I go directly to where the kids are. Kids are in schools, and that's how I've been able to be successful.
Amazing, man. Amazing. Well, where can people find the book, learn more about you? Where can we get more of Ty?
Well, you just said it. You can get everything from the hoodies to the missions to the books itself at tyallanjackson.com. I am not hard to find. You can certainly find me on every social media platform that you can imagine. Instagram is probably my biggest home. I think that's where we found each other.
We did.
But Ty Allan Jackson, because I'm still somewhat of an indie author, most of my books are sold directly through my website, and that's how you can learn more about me.
I love it, man. I appreciate you doing this. Thanks for jumping in, and man, I've got some thoughts after we're done recording. So I appreciate you, brother. Thank you.
I appreciate you. What an amazing platform and interview. I appreciate all that you do.